We are live. Welcome to my video. This is going to be my first spoiler-free review, then spoiler-written thoughts on the 2024 movie Civil War. Now, while I try to be very respectful when I'm talking about actual wars and other horrible things we human beings sometimes do to each other, like the way I do in my videos on the two world wars and the films made about them, this video will have a somewhat irreverent tone. I would not be doing this if this was an actual event, and in part it's because I'm trying to comment on the film itself not being as respectful and well considered as I think it should be, considering the subject matter. So this first chunk of the video will have zero spoilers. I will warn before I get into spoilers, both verbally, and there'll be a little thing at the top of the screen saying spoilers. The movie is rated R, so will this video be, and this is the part where I'm usually saying if I really like the movie or not. See, this is one of those, I admire the filmmaking, and I do think that Alex Garland was trying to do something. I don't know if I would necessarily say that he thought it through completely. Now, I did not originally plan for this to be the first Alex Garland directed movie I watch, much less do a video on. It was the first one I got access to, and the only one I'm watching via streaming, and, well, we know that movies disappear from streaming, so I figured I should get to it quickly so as to not risk losing access to it. I mean, certainly, Ex Machina did used to be on streaming, although I am glad that I will be owning a copy of that in not too long. It's ordered. I'm just waiting for them to ship it to me, which, let's see. If I recall correctly, I think they're sending it tomorrow or something like that, but yeah. I appreciate that it's not ideal to start with the most recent film someone has directed when they directed 3 movies before that. Now, I recommend videos on this movie by the 3 following excellent YouTube channels: The Take, The Writer's Block, and The Morbid Zoo. Anything that I don't directly express that disagrees with The Morbid Zoo's video, please assume that I do agree with her. I'm honestly not entirely sure I can add much depth to this conversation, but I will try, and other than that, this will be a video where I analyze the filmmaking and talk about what I think works. You know, I think others have done really phenomenal videos, you know, including the 3 channels mentioned, where they talk about the actual depth, and yeah. Let's see, so yeah, so far, this is the first film that he's directed that I watch, but I have watched some of the ones Alex Garland has written, and it is very clear he prefers to ask interesting questions rather than deliver too many answers to questions, and that's admirable a lot of places. I do want to say that. It is one of the things I love about David Cronenberg, one of my favorite, you know, writer-directors. I'm not sure this was the best choice of film to have that approach with. I think this might be a good place to either this is a good place to, you know, take a break from that, or maybe let somebody else make the movie. Now, the filming and editing really put us right there in an extremely effective way. It makes it impossible for us to have any distance from it. And then at other times, there are incredible swoops and pans. You know, the camera for parts of this reminds me of the kind of thing you'd see in a video game. Like, real-life cameras did not used to be able to move quite like this, but, you know, drones and all. This is essentially a road trip movie, complete with great needle drops, although since this isn't a comedy like Blues Brothers, Plan B, and, well, Road Trip, here they are somewhat bitterly ironic. And there are other times where the music is more like, dark and dramatic. And yeah, one thing the film does do really well is show the effects of civil war on, like, you know, the population. I'm not sure I want to go into detail before the spoiler sections. Now, there was no civil war in America in 2024. Trump won the election, thus did not need to start one. And despite what conservatives incoherently scream at the top of their lungs, quite a few of us leftists are not interested in a civil war or violence in general. We want all this resolved with minimal violence, preferably none. It's conservatives who are chomping at the bit to hurt people. But it is sad to think it's not impossible that there will be another civil war in America. I mean, is Trump going to accept, you know, in 2028, I realize they're right now trying, some conservatives are trying to change the Constitution so that he could get a third term. Although, since he kept saying for years that he won 2020, technically this is his third term. But if they don't, I'm not sure that I think he's very likely to willingly just accept that he's no longer the president. I hope that isn't the case. I would love to, in, you know, slightly under 3 years' time, be proven wrong. And to be clear, you know, I'm not saying for sure it will happen. But yeah, he's said it so many times that he has no intention of, you know, stepping back. He wants, you know, to keep going for as long as he can, because he kept committing crimes, and now he thinks the only way he'll consistently avoid justice, which I realize is not how he would phrase it, and that's part of how you know it's true. Yeah, he thinks if he stops being president, he will actually have to, yeah. That is still what I hope will somehow happen. Fuck, I'm sounding like a liberal, aren't I? I swear I'm not. I'm much, much further left. But I would love to see for him to face not retributive but restorative justice, and yeah, for him to not be able to destroy so many lives anymore. That might actually be what there is of the non-spoiler stuff. Yeah, the acting is solid. I thought the film did a really great job of, over the course of it, the action scenes and tense scenes and such, they get to a point where they're numbing, but at least in my opinion, they do not get to a point where they become tedious. And that is a very difficult balance to strike. And for a movie like this, I do think it is important to reach numbing effect, because at the end of the day, we're not really supposed to, like, cheer during the action scenes. We are supposed to be worn down. We're supposed to want it to end. You know, part of what the movie is saying is that this would be a terrible thing. So if it's, you know, exciting, yeah. It is not as effective as an anti-war film for reasons that I think The Morbid Zoo does phenomenal. I swear I'm not going to just constantly talk about her video. I'm going to try to make this the last time I mention it, but yeah. She explains why it doesn't fully function as an anti-war film, and I do think that's, you know, it's too bad that it doesn't, because overall I do side with those who say the movie probably shouldn't have been made, or at the very least, like, hypothetically, let's say this movie came out 10 years ago. Let's say it came out before Trump announced his candidacy at all. At that point, it would just be so speculative and just be pointing out, you know, because before Trump, and I'm not one of those people who say, you know, oh, it only started being bad because of Trump. But because of Trump, it is impossible to ignore or pretend, you know, what I hope is that as soon as he's out of office, the Republican Party will either have to change significantly to appeal to voters without screaming fear into their faces constantly, or will just seriously struggle to have any candidates elected to any office in America. You know, that is one thing. Like, Trump definitely proved just how low their standards are, that they're willing to support someone so obviously unfit for so many reasons. I've said it before, no matter who you are, you should not want Trump as president. If you agree with, you know, if you don't agree with him, I don't even have to explain further why, you know, or if you just, you know, think that he, you know, if you acknowledge that he, you know, he doesn't have the temperament, the skill set, the education, etc., etc. But if you love his ideas, you should not want him to be president, because a lot of the time he's terrible at carrying it out, and even when he tries to carry it out, he does so in such a crass way that, you know, he loses so many people who could agree with him. But I think that might just about cover, yeah, given when it came out and even was in production and all this, you know, and it definitely, it never shies away from being about Trump. I don't know how anybody says that somehow the president in this film, played by Nick Offerman impeccably, that he's somehow not supposed to be Trump. Like, it's all over the film, not just his performance and the writing for it, anyway. But yeah, you know, it is basically a movie saying this might happen, could this happen? And, you know, basically like trying to scare people. It's, you know, like as far as I can tell, it's meant to shake off the fence sitters. And it, you know that saying, meetings that could have been, a meeting that could have been an email? This, if this had been like a short film released for free, yeah, I think, I mean, I would have wanted it to make some different decisions for various aspects. But the fact that, like, no, this is I want to say $50 million movie, you know, not huge for like a blockbuster, which the trailers had some people thinking it would be. You know, people pay to see this movie, which I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying that movies should be like free to watch in movie theaters or something, but that does seem, yeah, to actually put something like this in movie theaters, charging people to watch something that might actually happen, especially when it is this confused. Yeah, not a big fan of that. I'm not gonna let it ruin, you know, I'm really looking forward to watching, like, as mentioned, ordered Ex Machina and Annihilation. Couldn't find a cheap copy of Men, which is ironic because a lot of Men are very cheap, and there are multiple meanings to that, and at least several of them apply. But now I sound like I'm like self-hating. I'm obviously not saying all men. I'm not even saying all men except for me personally, but a lot of men. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to Ex Machina and Annihilation. I hope that Garland got it out of his system, and from now on will be more careful when he makes movies. Yeah. Now, I feel like there's something I'm missing for the review. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of strong writing. I can really not get into detail without spoiling, so I'll get into that later. A lot of the staging is quite compelling. The action scenes, like, a lot of the time, there's not quite enough context. They do a good job of making it feel inescapable for characters as well as audience. You know, it could easily have ended up, given how little context there is, it could have ended up, yeah, very, very frustrating. Yeah, I think it avoids that nicely. Yeah, the pacing is effective. There are these quiet moments, and then every so often, you know, yeah, explosions, sometimes literally. And yeah, I think it handles the violence. You know, I appreciate that it doesn't feel the need to get, like, extremely graphic with the violence. A lot of the time, there's enough there that we understand, okay, that person, you know, got shot, but it's not, you know, it's not David Cronenberg. Yeah, that brings us to the spoiler sections, so I'm just gonna real quick note how far into the video. There we go. So yeah, from here on out, I am spoiling everything about this movie, and this is definitely a movie that I recommend going into without getting too many spoilers. I didn't realize before watching how similar this is going to be to 28 Days Later. That one isn't quite a road trip movie like this one is, but they are both about a small group of people moving from place to place in a dangerous version of a Western country that didn't used to be quite as dangerous to white cishet men as it is in the films. And yeah, in both of these movies and The Road, amazing movie. If you haven't watched in a while, this is a great time to do so. Yeah, you know, these movies do show that, yeah, this scenario, you know, every so often there's an explosion of violence, but there's also a lot of times along the way where it's quiet. And, you know, there are people who say that The Road is outright boring to watch. I do disagree, but I definitely agree that there are times where the characters are bored, and I understand why that, for some, translates into audience boredom. But yeah, this contrast is very effective in all three films. And since we're never given any further details about the exact ideology, I like to think that the Western Forces are a bunch of movie nerds who make people watch the Man with No Name trilogy, and the Florida Alliance are a group of athletes who exclusively wrestle alligators while both they and the gators are on meth. And yeah, lack of access to water, electricity, internet, you know, elevators not being completely dependable, very credible effects of a civil war, as is the hardening of the various people that we see. You know, the ones beating and threatening to kill the looters, because when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That's how you know they're the good guys. They value property over human life. And yeah, they talk about whether or not Sammy's going to get a ride with them, and like a tree, Lee leaves because sometimes Daddy has to be the bad guy. And not long after that, they're arguing over whether or not Jesse gets to come with them. They really do bicker like an old married couple. And let's see. Yeah. And I do also think they did a good job of, you know, easing it in there that, you know, Sammy's like, oh, you're fucking crazy. What the fuck is wrong with you? Can I get a ride? Like, he does want to go there as well. And, you know, yeah, Sammy tells Jesse, you don't want to miss this. And we see that either there's a civil war or the dead walk. I quite appreciate the contrast between hardened Lee and naive, optimistic Jesse. It's clear that the former is trying to protect the latter. The latter does not realize how difficult and dangerous it's been for the former. There's no sign in this film of Kirsten Dunst's past roles where she was a romantic interest, where she was charismatic and sweet and smiling and such, and that was the exact right decision. You know, it's a clever bit of casting, and I'm not saying it's the very first time that she's played so against type, you know, but yeah, you know, there was a while where there were some years where if Kirsten Dunst's name was on a movie poster, yeah, you know, there might be some heavy elements. They did, you know, as you probably know, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Yeah, but at the end of the day, yeah, you know, in chunks of those movies, we're really supposed to be very invested on whether or not she ends up with one particular person or another, and there's just none of that here. And so, yeah, having her here, it reminds me somewhat of, and to be clear, the following is, I am talking about, like, casting, not particularly much else about the movie, but Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet both playing against type. I forget exactly who, I think it might have been one of the two actors, saying, you know, they kind of play, like, Carrey is playing the typical Winslet role, Winslet's playing the typical Carrey role, and, you know, in some ways, Kaylee Spaney's performance is somewhat reminiscent of early Kirsten Dunst. And to be clear, I'm not saying, like, derivative or something. I'm so glad Kaylee Spaney is acting. It's incredible talent. By the end of the film, she's much closer to where Kirsten Dunst was for a good chunk of this movie. You know, she only, like, near the end starts to, you know, Sammy's death hits all three of them hard, but she's the one who's like, what the fuck are we doing? You know, this is not good. You know, she seems pretty resigned for most of the movie to the idea that they're probably not going to change anything, but someone has to document what's going on. And yeah, you know, near the end, she starts to really doubt if they should be doing this at all. You know, she's trying to protect Jesse the whole time, but yeah, the let's see, yeah, and you know, we see how little it actually takes under certain circumstances for someone to become incredibly hardened. You know, Jesse smiles, she's very eager very early on. It doesn't take all that long for her to start to toughen up, and she makes significant progress down that path over the course of the film. You know, by the end, you know, and early on, she's like, I didn't take a fucking picture. What the fuck is wrong with me? I have the camera. It's right there. This is what I'm, you know, I've chosen to do this. And there at the end, she shoots Lee after someone else shoots Lee. And, you know, yeah, she's briefly, like, really out of it there, but she's up in time to take pictures of the president. 14 months, no interview. That really is, yeah. Considering he's the leader. And you know, Joel goes up to him, I need a statement, and he's like, please don't let them kill me. And it's just like those words, you just sit back. Wow. 14 months, that's the best you could come up with? Jesus fucking Christ. And let's see. Right, hopefully I don't have to fucking say it by this point, but I don't know if there are conservatives watching. There could be. I try to make clear fairly early in my videos, like, sure, watch, fine, but you'll be hate watching, you know? You're not gonna like what I have to fucking say about your politics. But yeah, just to make clear, in case Republicans especially are listening, no, obviously, I don't want Trump dead. You know, I want restorative justice. I want him to live a long life making up for all the damage he's done. I don't want him dead. I don't know why conservatives are so obsessed with the idea that we on the left are violent and just want people to suffer. Oh, right, yes, I do. It's called projection. Now, let's see. I think that... Yeah, yeah, it's no wonder, you know, Kaylee Spaney is getting so much praise in recent years. A bad acting performance could have destroyed the character, possibly even the movie with it. You know, for part of this, she looks scared and or in awe of Lee, but Spaney makes it work each step of the way. You know, like, there's so many fucking, throughout movie history, so many female characters, because they're being written by misogynist men who, even if they might want to, and a lot of them don't, they seem genuinely incapable of empathizing with women. So many of these female characters, it's just a woman being scared and screaming a lot. And yeah, you know, this could have been another one of those. I mean, with both of these female characters, just like, look at all the subtle acting you'll see. See their faces? No. Well, that too. But their eyes. Lee only dies at the very end after becoming less hardened, you know, risking her life, yeah, more than risking her life, to save Jesse, who steps in to, you know, take the shot. Sammy also died. He also wasn't as hardened, you know, and he actually saved the other ones from the... Yeah. I don't think I have anything to add about the Jesse Plemons scenes. It's amazing. Yeah. Just... It's never a bad day when you get to see Jesse Plemons in something. Unless that thing is Antlers. But the... fuck. Antlers is a movie. I'm not saying that it's you know, you don't have to, like, live your life in fear that one day Jesse Plemons will be in your backyard wearing antlers. Let's see, the yeah, you know, by the end, Jesse and Joel are still alive. They were sufficiently hardened to survive such an unfair existence as living through war is, and Jesse has even become a bit of an adrenaline junkie, like Joel has been this whole movie. You know, she says you know, I've never been so scared, and I've never felt so alive. And you can tell from Lee's face, it's like, fuck. Now I gotta deal with another one of these. Extremely effective when, after all those civilians are unable to get water, the area is suicide bombed. You know, it's reminiscent of Children of Men, this sudden violence that easily could have hit at least one protagonist. It feels like it came out of nowhere and hit someone who's already miserable. I guess at least one person in that group found themselves hoping for death. Forgot to specify they only meant their own. And yeah, the group settle in the camp with a credible detail that while there is food, there are no tents available. They wouldn't have gotten in claiming to be press if not for ID and the road trip gang go. Alright, we gonna get it on tonight. You smoke? I smoke. I drink? Me too. Well, good, because we gonna get high tonight. I hate to say it, but I do think by far the most realistic thing in this entire movie is the idea that at least some people in America would act like there was not a civil war going on. And, you know, Jesse convinces Lee to try on the dress, wants to take her picture. She says she looks really pretty when she smiles, and when that doesn't work, she follows it up with, it's actually really annoying. No, Jesse, you're supposed to take her picture both before and after telling her she looks pretty. I thought you were a photographer. Oh, what's that? Not that kind of photographer. And yeah, for sure, there are some very important information about the world of this film that we are not given in the film itself. It's one of those movies that simultaneously provides too much and too little context, depending on what exactly we're talking about. I do think the things we are told tend to be written into the film in a way that isn't like distracting. Like, you know, technically it's exposition, but yeah, it feels like it's organic from the, you know, what's the word? Just like conversations, you know, like the thing about, you know, the president is in his third term. He disbanded the FBI. He bombed civilians, stuff like that. You know, the scene where Sammy suggests questions to ask the president. Yeah, it feels like, you know, these are. I mean, these are discussions that journalists have with each other. They you know, they're just spitballing here, but you know, they workshop the best question to ask, and yeah, you know, it's because to them this is like, yeah, of course this happened, you know. And I feel like there's more that I wanted to say. Yeah, I think it's especially near the end that the action just gets to be like, we just want, you know, yeah, we want them to just end this whole thing, you know. I don't know if everyone had this experience, but for me, for part of it, I was similar to Jesse, this thing of like early on being scared of it, but also having some fascination of and feeling like, yeah, that we should document this. It is important that people know what is happening. And yeah, you know, over the course of it, like Jesse is sometimes very scared of getting hurt, you know, and yeah, and by the end, I was no longer where Jesse. I was. No, I guess there's not actually a character that I really fully, you know. I did think it worked well that Lee had the instincts, you know, worked, yeah, over decades. She got to a point where she could deduce, no, he's still in there. And I think that might, let's see. Yeah, I think the movie does a good job with stuff like the violence against people who cannot defend themselves. You know, we have the looters, you know, Jesse Plemons kills, yeah, and you know, yeah, the Secret Service lady is also shot. You know, they could have taken her hostage. And, you know, there's that one guy who's, like, wounded and literally saying, please don't shoot, please don't shoot. And they shoot. And they don't even seem to... Nobody bats an eye at it. You know, this is second nature to the military. And, you know, for the press, it's like, you know, for some, it might be the most important day in their life. But for them, it's Tuesday. And after that, they managed to capture some. Presumably they surrender, and yeah, they gunned them down. You know, I did honestly just briefly think, oh, they're gonna get some information. No, they just wanted to gun them down. You know. And they even took the which I think the reason they executed the guy wounded on the floor is it would take longer to get him outside, you know. But yeah, they hate them. It's a fight for survival, and there's nothing more to it for them. Some of the bits where we spend time are, you know, close to soldiers did make me think, oh, I guess this is what the movie Fury would look like from somebody else's perspective. I gotta watch that movie again. I've watched it like I don't know, 3 or 4 times by now, but it's so fucking good. Let's see. I think that might... I feel like there's something... I did think it worked well, the thing about how over the course of the film, every so often we'll see, you know, X number of miles away from, you know, Washington, D.C. This thing of, you know, we're seeing them get closer. The bit with jumping between cars, it was such, you know, it's this kind of like fun, rambunctious, youthful element of just, yeah, young people taking ridiculous risks. And then it becomes this horrifying, you know, when we realize, oh, Jesse Plemons got them. And, let's see. I think that might just about... Yeah. I appreciate the detail that it was... Lee can tell that one of the let's see, is it the... Fuck, what's that called in English? I'm Danish. You know, I don't use... Other than these videos, I don't actually use English every single day. The luggage compartment of the car. I forget what it's called in a car in English. Yeah. I believe that's the one that's clearly open, and Lee has this loud conversation with Joel. Like, she wants Jesse to know that she'd rather Jesse didn't come with. Because she could have just gone up, closed the door, and then, you know, had the conversation with Joel. Maybe even walk a little further away, you know. Yeah. And I think... Yeah, Kaylee Spaney, fantastic job of this. Like, it's in part because, you know, and it is actually kind of like, let's see, I guess by now she's like, let's see, she's from 98, so she must be like 26 or 7, or I guess, yeah, 26, 25 or 26 when they filmed this. She has this very youthful appearance, which I'm not, fuck. I'm not saying that's not still young, but she could pass for someone who's like just turned 20 yesterday, you know. But she's also able to project a sort of, yeah, toughness from beyond her years, you know. Yeah, works incredibly well. And that's also part of why I say, you know, Kirsten Dunst, who, you know, famously knocked it out the park in... Fuck me. Okay, this will not stand. I'm going to find the title real quick. I think I know what it is, but just to make 100% sure, because that movie does not deserve... Yeah, Interview with the Vampire. You know, just... Yeah. That might actually be everything. Yeah, you know, it's very clear from watching the movie, Alex Garland has a lot of appreciation for the skill it takes to be a photojournalist or to be in the military. I think... I feel like there's something else that I... Yeah, I think, you know, one of the best parts of this film is when they're driving and, you know, you have the other car, it's like speeding, and it's like, oh fuck, what are they gonna do here, you know? And yeah, drives up on the side of it, and then they're like jumping between the cars and this whole thing. You know, it is this youthful energy. It's the kind of thing these people would be doing without, if there were no Civil War. And yeah, you know, sometimes you just need to temporarily not think about how bad it is. And you know, I think it is noteworthy that some of the most, you know, beloved anti-war films have scenes where the characters are trying to act like the world isn't at war, like that life is normal. You know, the two first versions of All Quiet on the Western Front, I intend to watch the most recent one. It sounds amazing. But both of those films, for example, and you also have it in the Bridge, you know, both versions of that. Let's see, what was it called? There was the miniseries that I did fairly recently. Our Mothers and Our Fathers, or something. Generation War, depending on where you're watching it. Those are the English titles. Let's see, and yeah, you know, I do appreciate this one also has that. And again, you know, 28 Days Later, The Road, you know, those two are not quite war films, but, you know, intense situations that also require, you know, just, yeah, the human mind has not evolved to withstand constant tension. I feel like there's something else. Let's see. Yeah, I think over the course of it, they do a good job of Jessie gradually getting to a point where she's comfortable taking pictures, even as, you know, really awful things are happening around her. And yeah, I think that might... Right. Also, the callous nature of the, you know, when they're like dumping bodies into the pit, and you know, Jesse Plemons just looks up and says, "One of them's stuck." You know, like the way he's talking, you would think he's talking about like, I can't get the last Pringle out of the can. God damn it. Yeah, that might be everything that I wanted to comment on, and that I didn't hear others say more or less the exact same thing. Fuck, I think I might have repeated some. Sometimes I struggle to not. I'm trying these days to not repeat what others have said about a thing, about a piece of media. Yeah, I think that might be it. So, right, I'm going to try to do Ex Machina and Annihilation before 28 years later. Shouldn't be too difficult. You know, what is that? Like 2 months? Oh, hold on. I can find that real quick because I have it right here. A little under 2 months is when that comes out. So if the shipping is indeed accurate and it gets here, they get her soon. Yeah. God damn it! I feel like there's something I'm missing, but I can't quite place. No, I think that might be everything. Yeah. As mentioned earlier in this video, I hope that Alice Garland, you know, is more careful in the future to not make the missteps that he did here. I am looking forward to more of his work. Yeah, I think that is everything. Yeah, here is hoping that the movie doesn't become prophetic, and in general, you know, just like hopefully the various conflicts around the world, you know, couple that are especially, you know, the genocide of Palestinians by Israeli forces especially, and also, you know, the war in Ukraine, Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Yeah, just, you know, I know I've said it before, and I appreciate that some people think I'm ridiculously corny when I say it, but in real life, violence should always be the last resort. There are so many situations that are not solved by violence, even though, you know, at a glance it might appear, oh, that actually solved it. No, they're gonna come back, or their brethren, or somebody else who agrees with the ideology or something. You know, that simply isn't, you know, I'm not saying it's never the case. World War II, it was definitely necessary to stop the Nazis. But there have been so many situations, you know, England and France were at war. You know, it's sometimes called the 100 Years' War. You know, it wasn't technically literally 100 years with just non-stop war. But what would happen is a bunch of people would die, and then they'd wait for the next generation to be old enough to fight, and then the fighting would resume. And today, you know, they're in, yeah, they have a much better relationship with each other. And it wasn't because one of them eventually, like, won the violence, and then it was like, oh, you know, no. Empathy is how we solve these problems. You know, empathy, science, understanding things, determining what the solution is, and then applying that, you know, and yeah. I really hope that eventually we'll get to a point where that is the norm, and we're not operating off fear and disgust and, you know, just, I've said before and I'll say it again, those kinds of things lead to just awful, harmful things, including, but not limited to, and I hope you're sitting down here, voting conservative. Ugh.